Welcome to another SuperStory Vidcast podcast. We're really excited today. You have your normal hosts, Houston Howard, Brad Lusher, and myself, Travis Carter, aka t-rev. And we have a special guest today, a guy who's near and dear to us and deserves a lot of applause and respect, Tomas Jegeus. And he joins us as the former president of Fox International Productions. He was the co-president of Global Theatrical Marketing and Distribution at Fox, held a lot of titles and has been exec, has seen a lot of things, a lot of ups and downs in the business, and has a wealth of information and fun banter to share with us today as we talk about COVID-19, Hollywood, entertainment, where things are going, where things could go. So join us, listen in, and I guess we can start really quick with the backgrounds again, as we normally do. Real quick.
When we do this, Thomas, we go around and we talk about everybody's background for the YouTube.
Great.
Audience. So, Trav, go ahead and kick us off. What do you got there in your background?
Well, what mine symbolizes and looks like is a number of individuals practicing good social behavior at a movie theater. That's how I interpreted it, with their mask on. And watching a movie. I don't know what movie that would be, but they're watching something.
They're not really social distancing very well.
No, I know. And when I found it, I found it on a social distancing image search. And interesting.
Yeah, that's no good. Brad, what do you got behind you there, brother?
You know, hang on. I have to say that I love this. It's like a reverse joke, because normally in normal movie joke, can you talk about your background? And then people say, yeah, it's behind me. It's like, in this case, I literally thought you were going to talk to Travis like, well, you know, I did this before and I was born here. That was the background. You literally talked about your background.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome. That is so, unexpected.
And honestly, it shows how the quarantine just changes cultural context, right?
That's so funny. That's so good.
That's awesome.
It doesn't matter where you've been before. We're all
exactly
stuck inside.
That's it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of why I went with a repeat today, because this is the picture I used last time from one of my hikes when we were actually allowed to go on hiking trails.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I want to go on another hike so bad. So I like.
Where is that? Where is it?
This was over here in the valley in LA.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah,
it looks great. Okay, I should have known. I should have picked something nice as well instead of my, office.
The Indian chief is pretty cool though.
Move some imaging. Yeah, so an artist that lived next to us when I lived in the art district in downtown, and we bought a couple of pieces from her. It's inspired by music. This is inspired by Land by Patti Smith, and I bought it because the first concert I went to, at least by myself, in 1976, which dates me, was Patti Smith. And that's why I want to get that the painting. So
that's a cool background. And I was going to say we haven't seen. I don't know if it's been 6 or 7 months since we've seen you, Thomas, and your hair's gotten longer. And the first thing I said is he looks like a rock star. So we'll have to get into some of your music that you've been doing lately too.
100%. So my virtual background is that of Superman, and I was a big Superman fan when I was a kid. Really had this tremendous fascination with Superman. Almost died a couple times trying to fly off things. Ended poorly for me. But the reason I chose Superman is I was reading about him today and the IP today, and Superman was birthed during the crisis of the Great Depression, and I think that leans into some of what we'll be discussing today. Of in the midst of crisis and calamity, some of the best sustainable generational art can be born. So this is my nod to a hopeful creative future for creators coming out of the pandemic. So it's a little interesting Superman tidbit for you also.
Good.
Yeah. So how you been holding up in quarantine, Thomas?
Pretty good. Apart from in the beginning, I was I got ill in the beginning, I think sort of the first week when the sort of stay in place order came out, and started feeling ill. I was ill for like 16 days, and it was sort of tricky because my wife, her immune system is sort of compromised because she had a chronic illness. So we had to basically live in separate rooms the whole time and walk around. I walked around in my whole house with the mask on and like wiping everything off and everything. So
Wow.
that was it was tough because of that. And also I felt really ill. I mean, I have no idea what it was. It could have been anything. I didn't have any high fever or anything like that. But it doesn't really matter. I was ill and I was home. So that was like 2 weeks. And after that, it's been pretty good. And I've got good practice as well, because my wife's been ill for almost 3 years, and she's basically been house confined for 3 years. So I mean, that's the reason I left Fox in 2018, beginning of 20, to be there for her, basically, instead of like, didn't feel like getting in like some sort of nurse or someone living at home or something. And she was really ill in the beginning. So that was the reason I left and took some time off and to be with her. So I've got training. I know how to do it. So
are your kids?
We've been home for a long time.
Are your kids
Sorry?
home? Are your kids home with you?
No, because they're they live with my ex. So they're here once in a while, and we waited a few weeks just to make sure that everything was like they've been home by themselves and not gone out or anything like that for several weeks. And so we saw them last week which was phenomenal, which is great. And they're like teenagers, the 16, 19, and 20. So
oh, wow.
Amazing.
It's good.
I
Yeah.
remember seeing them, and they weren't 16, 19.
No,
they were
exactly.
like toddlers or something, like 10, 11. That's amazing.
Still feels like that to me as well when I look at them. It's like, what just happened? That's not you guys. But anyway, it's good.
Well, first I wanted to say that's commendable, Thomas. And when we're in this Hollywood, in this hustle and bustle to move up the executive chain in the ladder, for you to take that time off and for your wife. I know, people don't want applause for that, but I applaud that, to be the first priority. That's awesome.
Yeah, it wasn't really. I mean, it's like when you face a situation like that, there's no choice. But I've got to be completely honest as well. It's like it was good timing. It was just when the announcement came out that Disney were going to take over Fox, and it basically paralyzed Fox. It just became a different place, and everyone started thinking about what's my future in this, rather than it's not going to happen, or what can I add to it, whatever. It was bizarre, and the timing felt right. I mean, it would have felt heartbreaking in so many ways, right? If it was like in a great period for me. I mean, and everything was fantastic, and I was about to start a new job. I was going to move from I was running president of Fox International Productions, which is we were doing local language stuff. We did China and Korea, and we did Spain, Mexico, Germany was a big one for us, Argentina. We had some big hits. A big Korean film called The Wailing. If anyone hasn't seen that one yet, they need to definitely catch that one. And then I was going to move into president of international productions, which wouldn't be like just doing local languages. It would be doing just a focus on looking at source material and coming from outside the sort of gated community of Hollywood, and also looking at it differently from a sort of P&L, profit and loss perspective, meaning when people do it normally, like how people sort of put together the analysis, the financial analysis, why if or not to do to greenlight the movie, you always start with the stupid thing to call it as well, the domestic market, right? It's the US market rather than North American market. Whereas there's so many films, I mean, that do so much better internationally. I mean, and when I started here in LA, 2005, it was sort of like, I think just over 50% of the market was international. And Fox, we were always overperforming internationally. And towards the end, it was like 70% of the revenue was coming from, especially in the theatrical world, from international. So you had to start thinking about that market. Sometimes give it primacy, over the US market, because why stop doing something just because it may not fit in with sensibilities here, cultural connection, whatever. So that was going to be my job moving in. But of course, Disney thing coming over, then it became a question mark about everything. So yeah, it became a very easy choice for me to say, you know what, this is the time for me after having worked for so many years for Fox and in the industry, to take a little break.
Sure.
Which is great.
Yeah, it was a crazy crossroads. One of my seatmate, or a woman that sat next to me at the Clipper game, she worked for Fox TV in the standards and practices. And then as soon as the merger happened, like, her and all her colleagues were wondering, okay, what channels are still going to exist, and
That's
just waiting and seeing what happens. Luckily, like, she's still working, you know.
Yeah. Oh, she okay. Yeah, because I guess on the TV side became sort of more, and that's still, so she's still Fox, right? In other words, she's not. It was Disney,
one of the channels that retained the Fox name. You know?
Yeah, exactly. So and now, I mean, and I'm not a nostalgic person or anything like that, but you know, it's 20th Century Fox as a studio is no more. I mean, it's like a little division part of Disney now, like a label. And, there's nothing wrong with that. Things change, right? Think about it. If you go back in history, everyone was going like, oh my God, a film studio is going to disappear. I mean, think about how many cars and so many sort of like amazing car brands that have disappeared, right? Yeah. That used to be around. They used to be, synonymous with Detroit or American car making and everything. They're just gone. Sure. And no one sheds a tear. I mean, this happens all the time.
All the time. Just like the life cycles of industry.
Yeah. The only thing, I guess, is like the thing that I gave more people, I think, that sort of like emotional connection. It was, for me, it was because, the reason I'm in the industry was like seeing, Star Wars, in a movie theater. And I always have that connection between the Fox fanfare that then sort of felt like it's emerged and blended perfectly. And then with this sort of like John Williams, Star Wars theme, it felt like they were connected, right? Yeah. And so that brand has its own meaning, in that respect. But you know what? In the end, it's the filmmakers, it's the producers, it's the people that work there, and the films and TV that they produced. That's sort of what's going to live on. So.
I was talking to a guy. He worked at Fox, and he was an assistant to somebody, and I can't remember who it was. But during the acquisition, they were deciding who they were going to lay off and furlough, and who was going to be transitioned over. Mm-hmm. And he was upset because he ended up getting taken over to the Disney side.
Yeah, I know a few people like that as well.
Yeah, and he was like hoping that he could get the golden parachute. But he was so good at his job that they said, no, we gotta have you in here.
I know, believe me, I know that. I know quite a few people like that. They're like, wow, it's my one chance, right, in life to get some money and then move on and maybe have some time off and actually get some cash for once. But but you know what? At the same time, it works out differently for people. My brother in Sweden, he used to be the marketing director for Fox only in Sweden, but he became the head of marketing for Disney instead, and of course all Fox and everything for all of Scandinavia or the Nordic countries. So he was happy to sort of not only keep the job, but he actually got a much bigger job as well as part of it. So it's been a lot of change, both good and bad and everything.
How do you judge now since you had such a unique perspective from the executive level? How do you judge the merger, the acquisition, I guess, of Disney to Fox? Now looking back on it a few months later.
You know what? I wish there was a way to properly evaluate it. Right? You really can't, because what you don't know, and I'm not like saying that people, dropped the ball and didn't want movies to succeed, but there's always this thing when you have and I've seen it happen so many times at Fox as well, when there's like a regime change, when the heads of the studio and they're there, and then they leave sort of a legacy that lives a few years after they've gone, right? Because they started and greenlit films and probably oversaw them and everything. Now they're into production and post and everything. So, but and I don't think anyone goes into a new job and just taking over and say, well, I'm going to make sure that the stuff that was done before I joined is going to like die so that my stuff will look better. No one thinks like that, right? But it's also at the same time, it's almost like feels like you're inheriting something that you weren't there at the conception of it, right? You didn't put it in motion in the first place. You don't have the same connection with it. So it's difficult to say that would some of the films have done better if they would have kept, old release dates and get them off into the, who knows? I think it was like a bad luck. Everything is cyclical, right? So you'll have periods in any media company. Doesn't mean it's a studio. You look at any media company or any company, right? This cycle. Sometimes it works, right, and sometimes it doesn't, right? Yeah. I think it was unfortunate instead that like there was quite a few projects that underperformed. Maybe rightfully so. I actually, funny enough, I watched Dark Phoenix just the other day. I hadn't seen it.
Yeah,
I'd seen the trailer and I thought, oh my god, it looks so bad and everything. I could foresee that it wouldn't work, right? I could see commercially it didn't work. When I watched the movie, I was like, hang on, this is actually better than I expected. Mm-hmm. It's better than Apocalypse, the one that came before, which I thought dreadful. That was like the worst in the X-Men series. But I didn't think it was that bad. It was actually quite enjoyable. But I saw that the marketing was terrible. There was no passion behind it. It was really by the numbers, everything. So I don't think it's fair in any way, shape, or form to say like, well, they could have done better this way or that way and everything, because everything changed, right?
Sure.
I know that what I feel sad about was that there was this amazing project that was not only greenlit, but it was like in production. I mean, tens of millions into production by one of the production houses that actually co-owned by Fox as well. Boom Studios, that had a project in production that was then like cancelled sort of halfway through production, and I'd seen stuff from it and it looked incredible. Wow. So who knows, maybe they made the right decision to sort of like shut it down, but I don't know. For me it looked like something quite fresh and new and everything as well. So there's I'm sure there's things that have opportunities that have been lost, right, because of what happened. But it's, what is that expression? No point crying over spilled milk, right? It just happened, right? It's just like, it's happened. It's what are you going to do? It's better than to figure out how to move it forward. And I do hope that they really find Steve Aspel, who's now head of production, is president of production for Fox, has been there for a long time, and he worked with with Ridley Scott and oversaw all the Alien movies and everything like that. Just really smart guy. And Emma, who's there, was before as well. It's fantastic, right? But Steve, he's been ready for this job for a long time, and I hope that they give him the opportunity to make it into what it could be, which is not just a small little separate label, but actually can do things that is not within the Disney brand, if you like, right? Sure. I think that's great, to do the R-rated, the horror PG-13 films, and maybe find new ways of finding stuff that is not part of the established brands already. I think that'd be terrific, sure. And I think he's the right person to do it. So,
well, what do you think?
Go ahead, Joe.
I was going to ask, thinking about that and having 2 years removed, and time to think and evaluate things that you want to go to. You're in a big studio. As of now, we're in 2020. Where are some of your aspirations? Do you want to go eventually back to a big studio, something mid-sized, something more small and independent, that more control? Where do you find yourself at in that, Thomas?
Well, one of the things that was for me sort of frustrating, I think, for everyone, for a lot of people, and it's not because of anyone's doing, it's just how the system worked, that it was built on revenue streams, right? And you get X money from the theatrical release. If you're in a studio, you get then some money from the old-fashioned home entertainment. It used to be VHS and rentals and sell-through, and then DVD sell-through and rental, and then Blu-ray tried to sort of give it a lifeline, and then pay-per-view and all that stuff, right? And then into the TV world, right? sometimes the sad thing is when I try to do things towards the end of my stint there at Fox and try to do things with Hulu and, assets that we own, we part owned, we couldn't because of the deals that were in place. And they were lucrative deals that people had with TV outlets and everything like that. So you didn't want to screw that one up. But that was the problem, was that it's the world was changing. Mm-hmm. But you're sitting there with deals and revenue streams and models, distribution models in place that are not of today, right? And it wasn't even of 3 years ago.
Sure.
That felt difficult. And I also felt one thing, and again, it's not like I'm not going to it's going to sound sort of self-serving. It's not, but it just shows maybe instead how difficult it is to sort of do new things as well. I remember back, this is now 4 years ago, I think, the first time I pitched this internally at Fox. There was a producer, Kevin Mishner, who came to me, and Kevin Mishner's doing Coming to America 2, which he's the producer of, which I'm looking forward to. So
yeah,
great.
I'm glad to get to do that one, and such a good guy as well. And it was this project kicking around at Fox called K-pop, K-A-Y pop, right? And I thought, like, okay, what's this? And then it was brought over by Big Fox to me and said, well, we don't sort of get this. We don't think we're going to do this, but why don't you have a look at it? And it was this story about this American girl who went over to Seoul to become part of it, sort of like, Korean Idol kind of thing, right? To be in an international K-pop band. And I knew K-pop. I mean, anyone that follows anything about popular culture knew back, like, not only 5 years ago, 6-7 years ago, where it was heading, because it was enormous. It was just handled so smart by the Korean management teams and the record labels. They didn't want it to explode. They want to grow it organically and everything. But to try to explain something like that and get people to be excited about that within Fox, they were like, what's K-pop? It's like, it was almost impossible, even when you show the numbers and present this, like, okay, I don't get it. And the weird thing is that they put that project in turnaround, and then a few months later, they pick up a few K-pop screenplays. It's like, wow, too late. It's like, I always called a friend of mine, maybe he didn't come up with the expression, right? But it's still true. A friend of mine called David Willing came up with this expression of that Hollywood is a gated community, right?
Sure.
And it is. People that make the decisions live behind gates, right? And then they drive in their car by themselves, and they enter another set of gates. And if they're a nice person, they say good morning to the security guard and their assistant, if they're nice people. And then they get into their office, let's entertain the world. It's like, they're afraid if they go east of Robertson, right? And here are they supposed to, figure out the world. I made the first US-Indonesian co-production and try to explain that one to people, that Indonesia is the 4th biggest country in the world. They thought it was like, oh, but it's like, isn't that some sort of like little country somewhere that we don't know where it is?
Like some island.
It's only the biggest country after America. It's like China, India, the US, and then Indonesia. I have no idea. No idea.
I actually learned that just recently because I'm engaged to an Indonesian woman right now.
Well, then you had to know.
I had done research. I was like, wow, 4th largest in the world.
I know. And not only that, it's an amazing place because culturally it's so different. Where you have a place like Bali, which is Buddhist, right? And then a lot of it is Muslim, and there's Christian parts, and it's just a fascinating place. And you go to Jakarta, where everyone's English is phenomenal, and they're like just embracing, and it's, at least at that point, it was the fastest growing. Forget about China. This was the fastest growing entertainment industry in the world. That's the kind of stuff that I feel like, you have to embrace. And that's why sometimes it's the danger of being here, right? And just being here. You are at the other side of the world, right? No matter which way you look at it, you are at the other side of the world when you're in Los Angeles. Even if you were in New York, you would have nearer to at least Europe, right? Here was like still got Pacific, Pacific Ocean between us and Asia, right? And that's
it's such a fascinating thing for me because speaking of Disney, when they launched Disney Plus, before they launched Disney Plus, I was very skeptical about whether they would be able to outpunch Netflix, because Netflix had such a incredible investment into original content production. And they were going volume, like a volume-based strategy all the way. And then when Disney Plus launched, I believe, above everybody's expectations about, how many people just immediately adopted it. Now, Baby Yoda helped with that, of course, with the culturally speaking. But what my perspective was on that is the thing that Disney has that Netflix doesn't have, or at least didn't have, was brand. Netflix had volume. Disney had brand. They had the princesses. They had Pixar. They had the Star Wars brand. Right? They had all the Marvel stuff, obviously, and they just keep going back to the well on brand. And in a commoditized, oversaturated market, it seems like that's the safe play. But now looking at it, even though they have less, they have less volume, it seems they're still being able to be competitive. But now I feel like everything's changing so much because of the coronavirus, because of COVID, right? And we did an earlier episode about COVID and coronavirus and what our predictions were of how this is going to change. And that feels like a year ago, and it was really just 5 weeks ago. But now it's really interesting how even just I feel like the atmosphere is changing in the town, to where we're now 6, 7, 8 weeks into this, into the changeover, and everybody's trying to figure it out. And especially theatrically, they've just seen the legs out of the theatrical model just get knocked out. How do you think that changes the studio approach to film and television, I guess film specifically, when you're seeing the theatrical model? I don't want to say won't exist anymore, but you see how vulnerable it is. What's going through the mind of the executives right now? I mean, your experience, you've been privy to those rooms of the executives trying to figure stuff out. Yeah, right. We talk a lot about what the writers and what the directors are going through and the creators. What's going through the mind of the executives right now, seeing just how vulnerable this theatrical model is?
Fear is what's going through their minds, I think. No, I mean, you know what? It's an interesting one, right? And it's easy to say, and I've done this so many times before, and I'm not sort of certain of it, right, in the same way. But if you look back, the history of the theatrical business, right, it's like over 100 years old, and it's older than the sort of the car industry in a way, right? It survived everything, right? The Big Depression, World War II. The big threat it had here in the 50s, right, if you look in the US, was not just the advent of the television, but it was also a change of how people live, the urbanization, where just look in Los Angeles, right, where downtown during World War II in the 50s was this sort of viable place, as all the big theaters were there, all the shopping was there and everything. And then everyone moved to the suburbs. And there was no theaters in the beginning there, and they started building them, right, after a while. And it survived that as well. It survived cable television. It survived video. And everyone said, I mean, the film industry sued the makers of VHS and Betamax because they're going to destroy our business. And then it became one of the biggest sources of income. The same thing happened with everything. I mean, look at when sort of Steve Jobs came in and changed everything when it came to music. Obviously, he did it in a legal way compared to what Napster and LimeWire and people had done before, right? There's always going to be new ways of coming in and have another choice and another opportunity to see and consume your wares in a different way. It's happened so many times. I mean, it's interesting to look back in 2002, the year after 9/11, obviously, and you would have thought that there would be a fear. I didn't live here then. I was here visiting, actually doing a job interview just a few weeks after 9/11. And it was interesting to see kind of movies that people actually wanted to see them. And the stuff that was flying off the rental shelves, as it was in those days, right? It was like Die Hard and stuff like that. You wanted to see bad guys get it, right? And you wanted to understand why, right? So it was like this You wanted closure on stuff. And then 2002 became the biggest year, right? I don't think it's been beaten since in terms of admissions, at least. And it was big in box office as well. Massive year in movie theaters, right? So sort of big comeback there as well. And when I joined in 2000, not joined, but I moved to LA in 2005, everyone back then, 15 years ago saying, oh, this is the death of theatrical. Now everyone's moving to this, that, and everything. I mean, it's like, it's happened before. The big difference, I think, now, right, is because I had a discussion with people about this as well. If you say people don't want to go to movie theaters, that's like saying, well, no one's going to go to then a sport event.
Sure.
No one's going to go to the normal theater, like a legit theater. No one's going to go to a convention. No one's going to go to the big restaurant, or I mean, no one's going. But the big significant difference between the film industry, right, and movies versus all those other things is that you have a choice. There's an alternative, right? At home, you could see, and especially you see what people have done now with, Universal going with Trolls, the World Tour, whatever it's called, right? Directly, straight into like pay-per-view and everything. And there's no way they're going to make more money that way. They're going to make less money releasing the film the way they did. Because it's interesting how you look at it. The big issue for the industry in many ways, right, is everything moving into the sort of all-you-can-eat buffet with the streamers, is that if I made a movie, an interesting example that I put together in my and I talked about a little later on about like what I'm trying to do next is to look at the how you build your P&L, right? How you make money.
Sure.
Producing a feature film, for instance, right? If you look at something like Get Out by Jordan Peele, right? If you believe the numbers, it cost less than $5 million to make, right? Now, if you have a film that good, cost $5 million, where do you want to release it? Theatrically. Easy, right? Because I don't know how many tens of millions of dollars the producers made on that film, because I don't know, I'm super paraphrasing now, but I think it's like $270 million it made box office worldwide, right? And then add on top of that one, still considerable DVD business that's still there, pay-per-view, the streaming business that came in after that one, eventually ended up on, television late night. I mean, it's got a long life, right? Shelf life. The money they will make versus you make the film for $5 million and you sell it to Netflix, and the producers and everyone make $1 million and go home, right? That's it. You make no more. Yeah. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you. And they have this massive hit, right?
Yep.
Now that's a big thing to lose, right? Sure, that revenue. The big problem, of course, is that the theatrical industry, the big issue that one have is that it's got the biggest upside in terms of revenue. Sure. It's also the riskiest one because you have to market, right? Mm-hmm. But I ask people this one as well, and again, it's not a nostalgia trip, and I haven't got a skin in the game because I want to, and I do already. I develop television stuff, I develop stuff for streamers, I develop short form content and everything. So I have no sort of nostalgia for it and feel like, oh my God, we have to protect this, right? But there is this thing that where you look at and you try to figure out, if I didn't do it this way, right? If I don't make it for a theatrical release, right? If I don't do it this way, how would I release the film, and how are you going to sustain a business if you don't?
Sure.
Right? That's going to be a very, very tricky one. And you have a whole bunch of people relying on this.
Sure.
Not just income and everything, right? But also how to, and also think about it this way as well. And this will change. Look at, I mean, Tiger King is like maybe an example of it. I don't know how much the numbers are inflated, and they asked before if it was big in Sweden. I'm not quite sure. And we don't know from Netflix either, sure. Right? But it's difficult to find cultural events, right? And I mean popular cultural events that have come from from the small screen, right? That has the impact of the big screen stuff,
right?
Even if you look at a film like Moonlighting, right, from a few years ago, that talked about something that hadn't been really sort of like really tackled in a mainstream way, in a sort of a mainstream movie, even a low budget film and everything like that. I'm not sure I can find something coming from the small screen that had the same impact culturally and socially, and eventually as well, sort of, financially. People used to say, "Oh, Game of Thrones, look at that one." Well, from season 3, it became that, right?
Right.
And people, "Well, The Wire." Yeah, after it finished, after season 5 finished, right? Then it became this massive. It's like with stuff, and especially serialized stuff, right? Very few things that out of the gate has that massive impact that it just like people just like knocked back, and it's like, oh my god, it's enormous, right?
Sure.
There's a few things, obviously, but in hindsight, when you look at them, they took a while to build. And I think the one thing that sort of the legacy, and maybe it can be translated into other things without spending the crazy money that we had to do, this idea of building a movement, right? And actually created that sort of marketing and the awareness and the sort of like, you have to go now. That machine had been built over 100 years, right? And you don't easily move that over to another way of releasing the same type of content.
Well, this doesn't just hurt the studios, right? I mean, even from an independent level, what we've seen are the film festivals. Stopped, and film festivals are like the lifeblood of the independent filmmaker, because that's where they would display their film, so that folks like you or part of the executive would be able to go to Sundance, go to Cannes, go to Tribeca, and see these things. Now they can pull them into for like a broader distribution, and without seeing the vulnerability of not just theatrical release in general, but specifically the film festivals. Seems like we're getting, the industry's getting hit both sides of the indie side and the the studio side. And
absolutely.
And we talk about, the most powerful thing by our estimation in entertainment is the power of audience. And people don't necessarily want to, they don't have the patience to slowly build audience. But the fact of the matter is, there are so many mechanisms, so many platforms that you can leverage now that can slowly begin to build that viewership and not just awareness in a marketing way, but actual fans of the story. And with podcasting is so popular right now, not just non-fictional podcasts, but fictional narrative podcasts.
Fictional as well, yeah, absolutely.
Reversion back to 1930s radio dramas that we're experiencing. Short stories on Wattpad are popping off. Lots of interesting things that are taking place. You can build organic audience, and once you have that audience, you begin to build brand, right? And once you have that brand, I think now you can figure out maybe a better way forward. It's just when you see the two legs of those tables become so wobbly, if not, it's hard to see a way forward.
But at the same time, what I think we're seeing though, and I sort of hope we're seeing in a way, again, without being, going back and hoping for, like things were better before, before. Nothing was better in the old days. Nothing was.
Yeah.
Apart from some music, but anyway, that's it. But I think what we're looking at, and I called it when I put together my sort of presentation for my own production company that I'm setting up, is that we're looking at the future. Actually, it's not the future; it's the now of every screen, no format entertainment, right? Because we still talk about formats, and most formats that we look at are built because of advertising in many ways, right? A sitcom is 22 minutes long. Well, why? Because their advertising has to be in there, right? And a drama is then 40 plus minutes long on TV, American stuff, right? And then everyone around the world follows that one as well. And then you've seen that when HBO and the cable one comes in, like, well, we can make one episode of Westworld is 1 hour and 9 minutes, and the other one is 56. Who cares, right?
Sure.
It complicates things in terms of maybe programming in a little bit, right? But we're getting to the point where the format will fit the story rather than the other way around. Now it has been this sort of like you shoehorn the story into the format they have in front of you. And if you can't do it, you throw it to the wayside, right? Rather than develop the story first, figure out how the best way to tell the story is. Who are the people that are going to be most receptive to the story, first of all, most interested in it? and how you're going to build on that one. And as you say, you mentioned, it's not just about telling it in one way, right? Sure. It's how you do that in so many different ways that you get to people, and not be confined by, well, this doesn't fit, this doesn't fit my table, right? Where I work on my desk, we don't do that. So I'm going to throw it away. I'm not interested, which is the saddest thing. Whereas I think in the future, people are going to have a chance instead to look at it from let's build a story. Let's figure out how we're going to connect with audiences. And as you mentioned, sure. Boy, if you don't connect, I mean, the power of a brand like Disney, and then the different sub-brands that they have, and the power of, look at the Marvel cinematic universe, especially, right? How it lives between, right? Sure. It's not just when the movie comes out. It's every day I go in and I look at the news. I use sort of Apple News and see every day the discussions about the various heroes and villains of both DC and Marvel and all the other comic books as well, the graphic novels, right? It lives in between. That's the thing, and that's what makes it exciting. So the idea of like, are we losing something? No, I think we're going to gain things instead, right? Why not? Again, I pitched something many years ago at Fox, 15 years ago, actually. And maybe, not saying I was smart, because it probably was a bad idea, but they were going to make a movie out of 24, right? Okay. And because 24 was so big, so they had Kiefer wanted to make a movie, blah, blah, blah. And I read the script, and the script was like a subpar Die Hard, right? With none of the signature elements of 24, meaning that, the real-time thing and playing with time signature, nothing of that. And you think like, what's the point, right? It's not 24 anymore. It's just a bad version of it. So what I pitch instead is like, call it 6. And what you have is like, you have 6 hours of entertainment of a story over a year. So you release the first 2 hours in January, second 2 hours, right, in May or June, and then the last one in November, and you have a chance to release it in those days on DVD in between, right? Sure. And you have a story arc across all 3 episodes, but individually they're strong in their own right. You can see one, and it's fine. It's like a great episode, right? But you also then play with time signature. You speed things up, you slow things down, you add an element of time into it, but no one looked at it that way, right? And that's why it never happened, because you try again to take a format made for a specific sort of like medium to deliver it, and then shoehorn it into another one. Never works, right? You can't. It doesn't make sense. Sure. So do the right thing for the story instead. Yeah. And sometimes it takes a while to get there. That's
funny. It's so funny that you're saying that, because the book that Houston wrote, it's as if you captured the essence of the process of that we go through in that book. And then that's pretty cool that you're saying that, not having read that.
No, but at the same time, we've talked about this guy so many times. Sure. The first time we met, that was the whole idea that you pitched and talked about the idea about, well, there were different way of explaining it in those days. There were different, vernacular used to talk about it that in those days. But as we go forward, it's just becoming more and more, not just important, it's crucial, right? Yeah. If you don't do that, if you don't connect at so many different levels. I saw this great thing from the book, actually. Yeah, it was great. Just on Instagram, that bit, I think you wrote about sort of like, if you know 3 things, right? Oh, great. Yeah. Do all 3. I mean, that's exactly what it's about. Yeah. It's like when you talk to people that are like, well, I'm sort of working on a script. It's like, well, why get stuck there? Do something else. Use the story, the characters in a different way. It would help you. Even if it actually doesn't be something they actually release, it actually helps and triggers you to get and have a much more fulfilling and richer story by doing it that way. Yeah. It's weird. People were afraid to do it before. I think people felt they were complicated, and that people, I think, felt, it was different divisions that had to then work together. I know from Fox, like, man, tried this horrible word that no one uses anymore with synergy, or people that did like, marketing across different release windows. Impossible, because you're dealing with people and their egos and everything. Sure. It has to come, that stuff has to come from the top, or meaning you just do it differently from day one, right? You just say, this is just how we do things. We're not going to try to change it into this. This is what we do.
That's it, right?
That's that's when you make it happen.
And I think what this is going to do is going to create like a battle cry, I think, around creators to develop more of an entrepreneurial spirit when they're approaching their own IP and their own ideas, right? I think everybody they're just hoping that I'll develop an idea and I'm just hoping and praying to the little baby Jesus that Disney picks it up or Fox picks it up, or the studios will come in and swoop and save me. I get the big paydays. They want to hit the Hail Mary from the 1 yard line, it's waiting to win the lottery. Now we're just seeing that become just such a vulnerable thing that we're now going to have to pick up the pieces, I think, in an entrepreneurial spirit and say, how do I attack the market early? How do I attack the market with all the stuff that I have at my disposal, right? And one thing that I know we talked about earlier was your music and how you started developing and producing some music. So what kind of music you making these days?
Well, no, but it was an interesting. I was going to get to that one as well, because you look at what happened with the music industry, which is not record industry anymore. Right? It's basically music industry. It's so many other things, right? And I think it's like a big thing that happened back in the early 2000s or late 90s when Robbie Williams, who was on Take That, signed this deal that was all media deal. It wasn't just like a record deal. Right. He signed a deal for live concerts, for merchandising and all that stuff and everything, right? And what you have, the saddest thing is, if you look at something like Spotify, it's owned by, to big extent, by the big labels. So you look at what the playlists of Discover New Music, and you think that, what is Drake on every playlist? There's Ed Sheeran on every playlist.
Sure.
What a surprise. It's like, where's the new music? Well, you can find it, but boy, you have to look for it.
Yeah.
A friend of mine that has been in the business for a long time, his stage name is M-Craft, M and then C-R-A-F-T, M-Craft. And he's been playing with the singer from Pulp. And I mean, he's been a singer-songwriter for at least 15 years, and he's got he's got even a fan base and everything.
Cool.
He released an album about 3 years ago, and the label, if you like, right, did nothing, right? And if you do nothing, it goes nowhere. And this is an album that got like 4 to 5 stars every review we got, like in The Guardian in the UK and Q Magazine, which is like the biggest music magazine there is and everything. Like, great reviews everywhere, but without anyone actually trying to reach then the audience, the fans, the group that actually could become their own sort of marketing people based on this one. Right. Without that, you never go anywhere. I know it now from the hard way myself. Right? Look, I've been doing music since I was a kid, and I never thought I would actually do anything with it. I've never been sort of super good or anything like that. But then I started doing things that I've always been doing on sort of for fun, doing more like cinematic music and do like stuff that feels like a music score and stuff like that. And then a friend of mine who's got a small label in Sweden said, well, let's start and see if we can find a label for it and release it. So at the moment we use it sort of like, call it yoga music, right? But it's not. It's relaxing. It's chill out music. It's anything. And if anything, a few of the tracks, probably you can hear the sort of the inspiration from Vangelis and Blade Runner more than pan flutes and sitars, right? I mean, that's not the music I listen to if I do any workout or try to relax or anything like that. I listen to film music or ambient music. I listen to Brian Eno rather than I listen to some pan flutes, right? So that's the world I want to be in.
Yes.
But I also realized that I'm doing this myself. Man, that's super hard, right? And I'm literally doing it, starting to build it myself and slowly doing it together with my friend and everything. But that's sort of the new world as well. Anyone can make a movie as well at home, right? An album, people, at least for 25, 30 years, you could do it at home, right? Before the hard disk recording, but you could do it. You could record, produce, mix, master. You could sort of almost do everything at home, right? Apart from the final distribution. Now you can do the distribution as well. You can get it out then.
Yeah.
And now with any phone that anyone has, right, in their pocket, you can easily make a movie, right? So that's the thing also, and I tell people always that used to come to me, and people are actors or directors, like, well, you are an actor if you act, right? You're a writer if you write. So never stop doing that.
Sure.
And then I thought that was so inspirational. That thing that you wrote, this idea that do the things you know, even if you're not. Doesn't matter if you're good or bad at it. It's like, I feel like this. This is a great way of writing this. Look, I've taken things from my real life, right, happening to me and my wife and everything, and especially with her illness and everything, that I've written into more sort of call to action about how to change the sort of health industry.
Sure. That's
then turned into stories about life in music, and also it's now going to be a basis for a screenplay that I'm writing, right? So, and I call it not dying fast enough, and I think that's one of those things that any problems that we face in the world, right? If people are not dying fast enough, then people don't care. Look at climate change and look at Corona in the beginning. Well, there's no one dying. Why do we need to do anything? And they're like, oh my God, now everyone's dying. And then people are doing something.
Right.
So it's, unless there's a real urgency, look at the homeless situation in Los Angeles. No one's doing anything until they're going to turn into, The Walking Dead, and there's going to be a riot or something really bad happening, right?
Sure.
Then people are going to do something. Then there will be all the resources. Until then, no one does anything. So it's that sort of like, I think that's, it's a good metaphor for creating stuff as well, right?
Yeah, you got to wait.
It doesn't matter if it's not perfect. Just do it.
Do it.
Right? If you're a writer, get up and write.
That's it.
Just write. Doesn't matter if it's bad. It will be good eventually. Writing and everything, a creative work is editing eventually, right?
Sure.
It's what you have and then making the best out of what you have. So just never stop creating. I think that's so, maybe full circle back, what's going to happen with the industry? Who cares, right? It doesn't really matter because it will survive, not only survive, it will thrive. It's just going to find its way. And I hope that there's, Avengers Endgame on one side of it. And I know that Cameron, right, when he releases Avatar 2, there's no way he wants to do that as a pay-per-view or like a streaming. Like,
no.
But that's fine. And it shouldn't be.
Sure.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the correction, right? That certain events, certain stories should be told. And you know what? Movies, the one thing I was going to say, the nostalgic thing about it is that it's still the one sort of art, commercial form, entertainment form that is larger than life. It's the one still that is larger than life. Everything else is sort of like you see it live or smaller than life on the TV. Like that's larger than life, and that's why it's so impactful, right? That's why it's that sort of high you get from being there and being moved and entertained, and you're laughing and whatever happening to you, right? But that can be transferred to any way. It's just that right storytelling for the right channel.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see, I think, how this ultimately changes production budgets because obviously the ROI is going to shift in the return if you lose that theatrical. And so I think we were talking earlier last week about how I'm wondering if Avengers Endgame was prescient in its title, like will that be the last great blockbuster to then transition into whatever the form looks like. I don't think cinema ends. I think this is going to kind of force it to change, just like everything changes. People still have a desire and an appetite for story, and that's the thing that I think is the most encouraging thing to even really come out of this is I read there was 400 billion minutes of entertainment consumed in the first 2 weeks of the coronavirus. People are just like, people still want stories, especially in times of crisis. People want entertainment for escapism, and so we just got to figure out the right way to approach it, and I think tying it together in ecosystems is going to be important as well. and so how you different aspects can support each other, and how your podcast can support your music, and your music can support your thing.
That's
Not just
exactly it.
not having just separate things.
Yeah.
But I think the distribution is the biggest miracle, that people are sitting on this miracle of God, which is the internet, right? I think that like just distribution aspects of the internet is just so amazing. And Trav, can you imagine, 25, 30 years ago when you were making music in your group, if you would have had the distribution of the internet rather than just trying to like hustle your tapes at shows?
That's exactly it, man. Yeah.
Yes, I hate saying would have, could have, should have, but I say it all the time with that particular one. I'm like, oh, the work I had to do to create an audience was so tough, and taking Greyhound buses to different cities just to do a show that wasn't going to pay me enough money, when I could have just spent pennies and to put something out on YouTube, and it had a cool little thing on TikTok that could have went viral. Oh, I can't stand it. I hate thinking about it.
But at the same time, you have to also you see, I tell my kids, when you don't get what you want, you get something better. Experience, right? And that's what it is. And you don't want to be without that either. I remember like being like 15, 16, playing in a punk band back in Sweden, and when they was going to perform a gig, and this band playing beforehand, all these people like jumping in, and when that band got off stage, all the fans left with them. So we played to the people that worked, and this like, that's the most amazing experience. It was like humiliating, but so cool, right? So you can't give up that stuff either, right? It's like it's everything comes together, and again, to your point, right? The idea with story, right? Everything is based on story, right? I
want to piggyback.
Our system is based on story. The idea of money, how that works, that's based on a myth and a story that we believe in this transactional system. We just believe in it because it's based on a story. Everything is based on that one. So the idea that something like that will disappear, it's just it's bizarre, and it's ludicrous. It finds its own way. And look at, what did people say about the music industry when Napster came in? It's going to kill it. What it did, it polarized it, which I think is sad in a way, that you have now just a handful of massive stars, but you also have more and better music than ever released, because it's just tricky to find it sometimes, right? There's so much of it. So maybe the idea of finding some sort of curators that will help you a little bit, and you have to try to find them by asking people. And I think that's where that thing, Houston, you talk about with the building of communities as well, right? That's where you find out about things, where people come together and like, look, I like this. Have you tried this?
Sure.
That we will need more and more, right? Because there's so much of it.
I agree.
As a singer, that's my big message to artists, producers in the music genre, to use the platforms, use super storytelling, use transmedia, though a lot of people don't know what that word is, to build that community as an independent artist. You'll be surprised what you can get out there. People are more than ever are now interested in regular people, and you can do some regular cool things and intertwine story into your music. Facts tell, stories sell, and intertwine heartbeat, a soapbox. What are you standing for? Something you mentioned, Thomas, earlier about after 9/11, people got into Die Hard. They want to get the bad guy. They want to know why. They want answers. So as we produce and create in this COVID-19, post-COVID-19, think about those movements, those things that really affect the heart, whether it's fun, whether it's serious, whether it's epic, and embed that in your story. Think about that, because people will have an appetite. Kind of piggybacking off what you said earlier, I thought that was really interesting.
But also think about it. There's an interesting thing, and I just thought about this now when you talk about that as well. If you look at music, right, it's interesting. The acts now that you are probably the ones that are the biggest, right? If you look at someone like Billie Eilish, right?
Sure.
It's not just the music; it's the story behind it. Think about it. How young she was, her brother doing it, and it's like bedrooms. I mean, that's a big story. Think about the story of someone like Taylor Swift, who supposedly, maybe she does, write all her own music and everything. She went from more like a country pop star to there are the ones that have the story that goes with it, true or not, it doesn't really matter, right?
Right.
They're the ones that actually stand out. You have like then a whole bunch of the second tier sort of, pop stars. If in this example, for instance, like female pop stars that do well and they have one hit and whatever, right? But it's not grounded in this idea of a story that you want to connect with deeper than just hearing a pop song. You want to actually connect with artists as well.
Yeah.
That's based on, what's your story?
Have you thought about how to weave story into your music, your yoga meditation?
Look, all I've started doing, and the thing is, and why I'm doing just the yoga stuff, I'm going to do like 3 albums to that one because I've got the material already. So I want to try with that and see how that goes. So I'm like reaching out to influencers and all that stuff, right? But then after that, the next sort of wave of music I'm doing more, it's what I call like soundtrack to, everyday life, soundtrack to like finding the undescribable beauty in everyday objects, right? The idea of like, I remember getting the Walkman the first time. But again, dates me, right? But the idea of actually having your own soundtrack when you're actually just walking down the street was just revolutionary, right? And I think that you don't have to have music to make you feel good. You can have music to actually make you feel bad or sad or anything and angry and whatever, right? But I want to make sort of soundtrack music for any type of environment. So I do that stuff as well. That would be more, it will have a different name. I, have this word of cocoonized, which it probably works really well now when everyone living in a cocoon. But the idea of like being like inside, and then I'm making my own pop music as well, right? So I have my album with 10 tracks that is like, more soulful music, is actually me singing and all that stuff and everything as well. But I'm too old to be like a pop star. So I'm just, I'm doing that more for fun. The other stuff, the more utilitarian stuff that I'm doing, meditation music and chill music. And I even just about, I think the third album I'm going to do is actually a 60-minute long track. It's like a mega mix of several tracks with some new music that sort of links them together. And it's supposed to be used for when people do, you do like an IV, for instance, like, and people have to sit there and you have to sort of relax and everything. And people taking ketamine for depression and all that stuff. And to have like a soundtrack for medical situations and everything as well, right? So it could be music for anything. And of course, again, there's so much out there. So the first thing I started doing is that I'm shooting my own mini videos, but I'm going to start doing it properly. I'll actually work with a guy who's going to do it really for me, to do like 1 minute little sort of descriptive lyrical sort of like descriptions of the feeling, not just showing someone doing yoga or meditating or something, but more showing environments and feelings instead, and promote it that way. And if 50 people listens to it, my job is done. That's it. I don't need more than that. I'm just doing it because if you are a creator, there's just an inbuilt need to create.
That's awesome.
And how many people listen to it? And well, you get lucky with certain things. And as I told you, my friend M Craft, who made, not just because he's one of my best friends, is like one of the best albums I've heard in the last 10 years. And that wasn't the biggest album of all time. It's bizarre, right? And sometimes you just get lucky or you get unlucky.
I was talking to somebody today, and I was talking to him about how in times of crisis we reorient perspective and galvanize perspective in a really interesting way. But our measures of success and failure are very skewed, because we use a world's system of to define success as the number of views, number of listens, downloads, what's your top line revenue, et cetera, et cetera. But when your entertainment's imbued with purpose and you understand the purpose why you're creating, even if 10 people listen to your music, a lot of people would say, "Oh, that means you're a failure." Not like that. Like, you don't know, you have no idea whether you affected one of those 10 people's lives.
That's exactly true.
Way, right?
It's so true.
Like we just have, and the goal is just to continue to create, continue to pump out content, and leverage everything that you have. And then I think if you approach the market in that mindset, not as a get rich quick scheme, not trying to hit the lottery, not now we have to, I think it's going to create this organic entrepreneurship in entertainment. That if you go with the right soapbox, right, the right heart, the right motivation, the right purpose, you'll find a community built around that purpose. I mean, my mom just went through 2 rounds of chemotherapy, and and she had to listen to something during infusions, right? And I think there's like that's a really cool thing of like trying.
Right, yeah.
And mental health is such an important conversation in today's world, like even before COVID, right? I mean, just anxiety and depression.
Oh my God, absolutely,
thing, right? So,
which is something that everyone, and obviously it's probably been sped up a little bit by the situation we're in now, and maybe some instances maybe be helped and everything. But you're right, that's the whole thing, right? It's like you do things for so many different reasons, and they hit people and affect people in a different way. Now, you mentioned something as well with purpose. It's something I've been thinking about, and I threw out with this. I had this unfortunate stint with a small company. I did 6 months last year. But one of the things that I talked to everyone about was, apart from just having a culture internally as a company, what do we stand for, right? It's an interesting one to make a sort of a moral decision as well in terms of the stories that you tell, right, and how you tell them. I think I kept telling people like this, like to succeed nowadays, like you, and this is probably already old, right? You have to be one of 3 things: either have scale, so you're a Disney or a Netflix or a big conglomerate, right? Or you have specificity. You're like a Blumhouse. You know exactly what you do, right? Or you do faith-based stuff, and you know exactly what the audience are. You're very specific in the audience you're reaching. Or you're nimble and flexible, meaning like you sort of not move after trends happen, but sometimes you actually do it before, and you're actually open to new ideas. But I also think there's a 4th one in it as well. It's to stand for something, right? And it's an interesting one that I'm fighting with internally as well, because on one hand, well, it's so conflicting for so many reasons for me as well. But about violent movies, how violent they should be, and what kind of violence you want to show, and what that means and the impact they have on people. When people say they're feel-good movies, well, that means they're feel-bad movies as well, right?
Sure.
That have a bad impact on people. And when do you know when, right? And do you want to be involved in that? It's for me such a tricky one, right? Because and maybe it's the older I get, this sort of weird sort of protectiveness inside of me, which is ridiculous because I can't tell other people what to do, right? But everyone's, when I talk to a lot of screenwriters, say, "Oh, First Amendment." That's true, but everything comes with responsibility, right?
Yeah, sure.
You can write what you want, you can say what you want, but it'll have an impact, and that one you have to figure out, right?
For the stuff that we've developed, we've kind of looked at it as long as you're able to teach something, you can show somebody the right way to do something by showing something bad happening.
I agree. I agree.
You can learn from something good or bad, and so it's kind of however is best to tell that story. It's kind of how we've approached it.
I mean, it's such an interesting one, right? The idea of violence. I remember growing up in Sweden. It was interesting where the James Bond films have like not R rating, but really high rating, and the reason for that was because the violence was so sort of fake. You can hit someone 10 times and they get up, where in real life that doesn't really happen, right? So for me, violence is not a bad thing if you show that it hurts, right? That it has an aftermath, right? It's like there is there's times when it has to be used, but it has an impact, right? And there's an aftermath to everything has a counter reaction to something, right? And everything, so I think that's something as well for people to think about. It's not just it's like that old Stone song, "It's only rock and roll but I like it." Well, it's not only entertainment that I like it, right? It's more than that. It's actually part of our cultural fabric, right? There's a reason why films that have message in them, right, they do well, and they resonate with people who haven't seen that for a while. It hasn't been widely available before, and I think that's a great thing. I think that should be done more than it is now.
Guys, we are coming up on an hour, so we should wrap it up. And Thomas, I have one favor to ask while we're wrapping up. If you could hold your dog.
Yeah, show my dog.
Just because
Dogs
win in any type of entertainment.
This is one of our 4. This is Stuart Little. And then I've got one called Gary Newman, after the synth pop artist.
Sure.
We got Figgy Pudding, who's the only girl, and then we have Stanley Kubrick.
Wow,
is one of them.
Those are great names. Those are awesome.
That's my
fantastic name.
The only one, the next one we want to have is Sir Michael Canine. I think that'd be a good one.
That's good.
That'd be really good.
You need to get one more dog just for that name. That's all.
Yeah, exactly, just to get the name right. But and this guy, he sort of follows me around everywhere. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, we'd like to thank everybody who joined in, who's listening in on the Vidcast podcast. And I guess I didn't get a quote in today, so we'll end with one. If you want to succeed, you should strike out on new paths rather than travel the worn paths of accepted success. That's John D. Rockefeller. Think different, be true to yourself. Thanks, Thomas. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for great conversations. Smart stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff left on the cutting room floor. We gotta revisit with you again.
Good stuff. All right.